Just watching this video with Bashar today, and the person in the audience was asking him about following your highest excitement. And this is such a misconception that we learn in our society, especially about working hard and struggling and pushing through our fears. It's actually not the way to your potential, because your potential is the most natural activity, most natural task, most natural thing that comes from your being. And it's actually lived every single moment. But we as human beings in our modern society have deviated so much from our sensing and feeling and our own truth that we adopt all the things that we believe that we should be doing, and they sort of play here as our programming. They become our programming, which really divorces us from our actually true essence of being, how we're actually supposed to be and what we're actually really supposed to do, right? Not just in the grand scheme of life, not just like the big things like the career and, midlife crisis where you wake up and you're like, oh my God, do I really want to be married to my partner? No, not just that, but every single moment we're divorced from our potential. We're divorced from our own inner truth. And that's such a crime, right? To be living in the society today and to not actually have an idea of who you're supposed to be or who you really are, like at your core. And women experience this in the form of pleasing to such an extent. It's a devastating thing for a woman to actually go through her life and lose her essence, right? And I'm sure men do too, because this is just the society that we live in today. We've learned so much and there's so much information available. And what ends up happening is that if we don't have our own inner guidance, if that's not strong enough, then we just start taking whatever we learn, like the next thing that we learn or the last thing that we learn, and we adopt it, even if it's not the right thing for us. And it's a cardinal sin to abandon your own being. If you don't have you, then you don't have the truth, and you don't have anything. You don't have your very existence, right? You're living the life that is not your own, right? It's the life that's not meant for you. It's the life that somebody else or society has deemed for you. And ultimately what that is you just, hearing random things, or, following gurus or whoever it is or whatever it is, or admiring your partner, admiring, somebody else, admiring a family member, admiring a celebrity, right? But it's not true. It's not true to the essence of who you are. And your life isn't supposed to be lived in limerence, right? It's not supposed to be lived in admiration, adoration of somebody else. It's actually supposed to be lived in your being of yourself, in your being of your truth. And so many of us, right? Like we just, if it's not limerence, then it's like it's distraction, right? Or it's some task or activity that is simply not our truth. It's not the best thing or the thing that we actually need to be doing in that moment. What it is something that we've kind of used as a substitute, as a replacement, right? And that could be anything, right? If you've been a gym goer for many years and all of a sudden something else in your life is more exciting, that the gym going is not happening, right? But then maybe you attribute it to fear or something else, or your nervous system, and maybe you had an illness and you're like, no, I'm recovering, my nervous system isn't there yet. But then if you actually think about maybe now at this point what you're most passionate about or what you're most excited about, there's something else that's more exciting than going to the gym, right? And that maybe just be at this time, right? And that's the thing about following your excitement. It's literally you follow your highest joy, your highest excitement in the moment, and that can change from one moment to another. But the fact that you trust, right? You trust that highest excitement in this moment, and then in the next moment you trust your highest excitement. Whatever that turns out to be is however your life turns out to be, but you just trust it. And when we start living in this way, it's so fear-based, the way that we've been programmed our entire life, that our mind, even if we, change our mind, right, make a different decision in our mind, our body still has to be on board and our nervous system still has to be on board. And that can take a little bit of time, and that's why sometimes there's a process of transition for some of us. But that can even happen overnight if you wanted to, right? If you can command your body, if you understand, my body is at my will, my nervous system is at my command, and literally what it needs is it needs certainty. That's it, right? The body moves and the nervous system moves, right, with certainty. They operate at certainty. So when you are following your highest joy, when you are following your highest excitement, if you're moving in that direction with as much certainty as you can, right? Take up as much space as you can in your being. Be as sure as possible of your being. And just know, gosh, my life is already following this path. It's already happening this way, right? Even yesterday I was following my highest, because every moment, right, I'm doing the thing that I feel like is most exciting for me, that my being is naturally gravitating to doing. And the more, suffering, the more layers of thought and conditioning that are shed, the more that I'm actually I'm my the deeper truth of every single moment is becoming clearer to me. And so I'm actually more and more living my highest excitement. I'm more and more living my truth, and I'm more and more living my potential. And this is so key to know, because as human beings, living in our society today, it's really it's been so off-putting for so many of us, that when we wake up and we realize, oh my gosh, like, this is really how I've been living my life so far, like, not as my truth, right? Whether you're female or male, and then you come to a point, you're like, oh my gosh, I completely abandoned like who I was, like. And maybe you didn't have a father figure, or maybe you didn't have a mother figure, like a strong mother figure or a father figure in your life, and you didn't feel special as a child. You didn't have the bond that every child needs with their parent. Maybe you didn't have that, and so you could sort of start looking for that in everybody else. And without that bond that actually develops the essence of who you are, it develops your awareness, your inner awareness of yourself, your inner world. Without that bond, you can't develop that inner awareness and inner world. And so what happens is you start looking for, your mind is easily programmed, easily brainwashed by anything that you hear, right? And you start looking for whatever that programming is that suffered in that early relationship with your mother, or, whoever was your primary caregiver, or even your father, whoever, that really caused you to feel at a loss in yourself. You start that programming that develops then as a child. It's the same program that becomes transferred to every single situation, every single experience, and every single person, right, in our world. It becomes our lens of perception. And so to do this work and actually come out of the lifetime of conditioning that we've experienced up until now, this really is the reason for our existence, right? As a human being, right? There's a point in time where you're going to go through this play. And this is why, in spirituality, they call it the personal identity, right? It's the play of the divine. You can compare it also to a video game, where every single level, right? Once you figure out the rules of that level and how to operate at that level, right? You reach the next level, and the next level, there's always going to be a little bit of a learning curve, a little bit of a challenge, at least in the beginning, when you realize, oh my God, at this level, I can only run, or I can swim, I can't hop like I did, or I can't walk like I did in the last level, right? It's always changing. So life is very much this way, and every single moment, right? You figure out, by following your highest joy and by following your highest excitement, your mind is sufficiently cleared, right? And every moment it will be cleared, and the strength of your emotions will become stronger. Your mind will become clearer. And guess what? You'll actually be able to ascend quicker and quicker to living at your potential, to actually manifesting the life that you've always dreamt for yourself. And this is what nobody tells you, because society is all about working hard and following the conventional model of success. And truly, if you're living your potential, you're not following a conventional model. You're actually, even if you had followed a conventional model, there was some trial of you, something, some journey for you to actually be your truth, even in the system. And so whatever that balance is for you, or even if you haven't followed the conventional model and you're completely going on your own journey, this is what you learn: to be true to yourself and to literally feel your way through. And your intuitive powers are so strengthened, right? Especially when you've gone through your whole life abandoning yourself, and now you've waken up to more and more of your truth, more and more of like, oh my gosh, your inner world, right? Your intuitive powers are now developing, right? And they're only going to get stronger, and you're only going to deepen in presence, right? So before, maybe you were distracted all the time, and maybe your experience here was the programming, right? Maybe it just felt like brain fog, or like, some kind of blockage, right? And somebody called your name, and maybe you you weren't attentive, you didn't hear them, right? And maybe that was a pattern in your life. Or today with with phones and screens, right? Maybe we've sought distraction so much that we're actually not present, and we've succumbed to this programming. And so now life is about coming out of the programming to be present, to be joyous, right? To be excited. And that's really where you'll find and return to your eagerness just to be alive. And that's really how we were as children. But so far up until now, right, we've lost that because we've gone astray just from our truth. And maybe that's because as children, we didn't have the sufficient bond, right, that we needed in order to develop our inner experience. And so void of our inner experience, divorced from our inner experience, not even knowing that we have an inner experience, right? How many of you at age 22, like me, or 22, 23, or sometime in your adulthood was like, oh my gosh, I have a voice in here. Like for the first time, you actually started paying attention to your mind. That took me 20 something years, right? To even recognize I had a voice that was playing in here. And so up until that point, trauma had literally blocked that voice out. But I remember as a girl, maybe 8 years old, right, or 6 years old, experiencing that voice in here, somewhere between being a teenager and, being, I lost it maybe for at least like a good, 10 years, 7 years at least. It was completely gone. And I was just completely going through the motions of life, because what happened was my home environment was so difficult. My mother's behavior had become so exacerbated after my father's death. Literally, the rage and the aggression was it was tremendous at home, where the entire atmosphere just became toxic. And so at around 15, my ADHD became so severe. And I actually was also diagnosed with autoimmune Hashimoto's at the same time. Literally at the same time, both of them. So it's no wonder. And so from the time I was about 15 to when I graduated, right? So literally my high school and my college years were spent in intense dissociation, right, from reality. Like I literally wasn't here and present in my body. And then my 20s became somewhat of an attempt to come back in my body, but I was still experiencing ADD heavily, right? Even maybe just as heavily as like my high school and college. But there was the opportunity now, I graduated college and I was living at, with my partner. I moved in with my partner. And so there was the opportunity to actually be present in conversation. So there were more present moments, but there was still so much dissociation. And so when I turned 34, I had a profound awakening experience. I had my spiritual awakening, which is the experience that we are God, right? We are the universe. We have the experience of the irreducible force, right, in this body. Like you could be, for me, I was sitting and meditating on my balcony, and literally it was like there was no weight to this body. It was like completely fluid. It was like it was like I was the universe. There was no boundary between, me and the trees, or me and like no physical boundary. And so it's a very difficult thing to explain, right? And even when we experience it, there's no way even for our own mind to understand it. But up until I was 34 and had this profound awakening experience, I had been completely like, my entire 20s was really just about doing starting the inner work on myself, journaling, right? Like rewriting the story of my past, rewriting the expectations of my mother, like the ideal expectations that I had of my mother. But I still didn't dig deep into the trauma that I had with her. And that trauma that I had with her was something that I only was really able to brutally heal. Like the brutality of it, I was able to heal when I had my spiritual awakening at 34. And so what happens is, once you have the experience of what you are in this body, once you have the experience of what you are, everything that you are not comes to the surface. And this spiritual awakening is the fundamental experience that we can have as a human being. It is the highest experience, because it literally is what we are in this body. So if you are having the highest experience that you are that a human being can possibly have, then every single other experience that you have have had in your life comes up to be seen and literally shed. And that's why it's the most unexplainable event that can happen to a human being. And many people, when they experience spiritual awakening, they literally walk out of their lives, they walk out of their partnerships, they walk out of their families for the time being, right? Physically, at least. And they go into the cave, they seclude themselves, they isolate themselves in their bedroom, right? And this happens for a period of years, right? It could be 3, 4, 5 years that you just spend completely in isolation, or maybe a good 2 years, or even like 6 months, like if you don't have the opportunity to be alone, right? And somehow the universe will actually afford this opportunity for you. And for me, it happened during the pandemic, because my partner in the beginning of 2022, his father was diagnosed with cancer. So he had to go overseas to take care of him. And I found myself living alone for the very first time in my entire life. And I was so scared, because there was the fear of just living alone without my partner, being without my partner. And we had also separated right before that. So like all these things were like, psychologically playing in me. And none of the fears are like very, very clear as to really what they were. They just kind of play in the form of thought. But just remember, there was just a tremendous